Years ago, I participated in Garage48 first green hackathon that was held.
The green tech.
Yes, and I came here with another idea because I was I had almost given up this textile industry stuff because I couldn't find any support. And it was from that hackathon where I met Runnel from Climate Kick, like a really good mentor that I've had since then. And he told me that, hey, you have to do this. You have to do this. And that's where we got to the Climate Launchpad. And really, I very much advise that program because it helped me and a lot of other startups there to put aside the question of environmental issues and focus on the business case, which is kind of like, you really need to do that. But before I jump into the textile industry, it's again textile industry. My background is in economics. And 8 years ago, actually, I started researching why some companies consider eco-innovation as something that has to be a strategical part of the company, and why they are actually making business from it, and others don't just care, and how to integrate environmental issues more into business. And the textile industry was just one case study for me. I then worked for 5 years together with Runnel, and working with her, I 4 years ago went to Bangladesh first time, and when I then saw these huge piles of leftovers there, basically a designer like Gret and many others like her, they can only solve maybe less than 1% of leftovers that are there. So it really needs so much more systematical approaches. Most of the examples that Gerli brought it's all in niche level. These are really good ideas. They do make sense. They also make sense in monetary terms, but it doesn't very often reach to that mass scale because the mass market of fast fashion is just so well functional. It's so difficult to go against it. So the project that I have run for 2 years now is trying to tackle that mass scale and creating real impact of it. And we are looking into since that 4 years ago visiting Bangladesh, I started to think how to do it, how to solve the waste problem. So it's all about, for me, about the production waste that is created from behind fashion production. So I'll tell you how the story has gone for me. But first I'll show you a video clip it was almost 2 years ago that I won the Global Change Award from H&M Foundation with my idea. It was 2,700 ideas applied from 120 countries. So getting that award, being among 5 winners, kind of gave a very strong understanding how the idea that we developed is really valuable for the industry as well. And that award has helped us to carry out quite extensive research from among factories, huge garment factories in Bangladesh and China. And every time I go there, I always make clips to show what's happening there. So it's a clip that was put together for Fashion Revolution Day Estonia. It's in Estonian, but it doesn't really matter, I hope. It's just how the clothes are actually made. You know how your clothes are made. The cotton is turned into yarn. And even better yarn. And their yarn is made into fabric. 150 billion clothes made every year, 20 pieces per person. And it's laid, the fabric is laid and cut manually. They produce 2 garments per minute. After production is quite crazy. manually printing pictures on their clothes. So it's all manual work, even they print on the packaging manually. So it's quite a different world out there, which is quite difficult to imagine when we live in such a software, like e-services world. I don't know how to say that. So yeah, basically. I know what makes nervous standing here is the microphone. I just hate microphones. I've always hated pitching. When you do a startup, you have to pitch everywhere. I just hate it. So this is a nice picture I made in Bangladesh. This is how they treat these leftovers now. They just push everything down from the cutting table into one big pile, and then only later they start picking out some things that they could maybe use somehow. But the moment it's pushed together, the whole material just loses its value. There are quite many people working in the sorting of it.
Somehow you just turned off the batteries for that.
Are they employees or they are kind of scavengers that are trying to...
Yeah, they are employees.
Okay.
They are just working behind the factory sorting stuff. And it's just some part of it, because I also have pictures how the other part they're just like pouring into this ground, basically, just dumping behind the building. And the other side of it that we are working with is everything there is manual work. They have these pages after pages after pages of numbers. Yeah.
There were a lot of bags there. Is it on the previous picture? Is it everything is leftovers or is it just a trash? These are
what's the difference
leftovers of fabrics?
Yeah, this all fabrics.
All this.
Yeah. It's this picture is made in a factory that makes 7 million garments per month, and they create 300 tons of leftovers per month, which is like on average it's something like 25% of all resources are just left aside in different formats. I'll come back to it in a second. But so when we took this question, like there is so much waste, something has to be done. So let me tell you what the situation is that what we're dealing with. This is an example of H&M supply chain. So to actually want, yeah, it's funny. I agree. And it's only part of the supply chain. So this is the supply chain only to the point of shipment. So after the shipment, it's still ongoing. So in total, they are working with more than 2,000 factories, garment factories, and actually, yeah, this part is the only part that brand is actually dealing with. They don't have much control about what's happening here. And the reason is that brands are legally independent entities, and they are legally independent. So as a brand, I don't really have the responsibility what they do here, but now they are forced to take this responsibility. It's kind of a mess. It's quite difficult to understand what's there. And throughout the whole supply chain, when you want to start reusing and recycling, you have to consider the whole ecosystem, like Gabby also mentioned. The other thing I wanted to give you an idea about is that the way how all big corporations applies actually everywhere. We are stuck in path dependency. It means that when we want to go somewhere, we can see like where we're stepping, but we don't know where it's going. So the whole circular economy is kind of like the whole humanity is walking a path where we don't really know where it ends up. It's nice years that I can't actually remember, I don't have the reference here where I took it. I think it was Harvard Business School report. When a company wants to do eco-innovation and walk towards circular economy, then the first thing they start to think about how to comply with the regulation and how this could be an opportunity. Second step is, like, can my suppliers also meet the regulation? So basically, the fashion industry is on that stage here, in mass of it. And my product services are designed better. These are the examples that Kelly brought, which is like some have reached that level, on niche level, but mass market still isn't there. Then we get to adapting new business models, and then we get to next practice platforms. So if somebody walks through that path, then next follower can take a much straighter path to the end of it. I think with our solution we are kind of trying something here, because we are trying to offer a solution that goes through supply chain. This is something Ellen MacArthur said, that Ellen MacArthur Foundation reported that a lot of things are happening. When you think about this thing here, a lot of things are happening vertically in one level of the supply chain, but very few are crossing over these layers. And also to give an idea of what are we facing when we have to cross the challenges, the trends that are happening. What is the industry already doing about these production leftovers, for example? So one thing a clear trend is that all brands are kind of running a marathon. Who wins in the chase of getting the dominant market of better fibers, recycled fibers, organic cotton, whatever you can get grab in your hands. And there's not much they can actually use when they think about better input fibers. So one thing that we're saying that, hey, but there's so much waste, you could use that instead of only talking about organic cotton. Okay, it's a lot of story. I'll get more into details of what we actually do. That was the theory, it's always boring. So the first step we have been taking is to understand how big are the volumes of leftovers and what's the market value of it. So how can we actually increase the value and make a business from it? From production leftovers, it's something like more than a third of it is smaller cutting scraps. Small bits and pieces that cannot really be used as fabric. It should be recycled because you can't do much with it. Another 1/3 or more than 1/3 is coming as bigger fabrics. Anything like defected fabrics, roll ends that were too small to put in that lay of cutting, or cut pieces that are bigger than 1/2 meter that could be actually used in production. And then some part of it is overproduction, rejected garments in the format of clothes that don't reach the stores actually. Then we are looking into like what is being done with this. I just wanted to tell you about waste here. Gary also mentioned it a bit, but basically, environmentally, it makes sense that you first prevent. If you can't prevent, then you use it. We call it remanufacturing, when you use the fabric again in production. Recycling. I separated cotton and mixed material because you can actually mechanically recycle cotton and make new yarn out of it. For mixed materials, the technology is not really there yet. Then it's downcycling, putting scraps into furniture, car seats, energy recovery. this is one funny story how we visited a factory who was so proud of saying that they are zero waste producers because they burn everything. And they were really proud of it. And then it's landfilling, but the very lower level I put here, selling to local markets, is that it goes somewhere into the whole thing here, but nobody actually knows what is happening to it. So the dominant thing is that almost all scraps from factories are just sold somewhere and nobody knows where it goes. And the situation in Bangladesh, where we have been doing most research, is that currently factories are earning quite a little from selling these materials to local traders. It's something like, on average, 40 cents per kilogram that they earn. And when you compare it to new fabric, on average costing $6 per kilogram, then it's like 10-time difference of how much money they could be making from the fabrics instead of just dumping it or like not even knowing where it goes. So we have estimated that if the brands would actually start reusing their own leftover fabrics again, then factories could earn something like 3 times more for their materials. So when we understand how much is there, then and what's the value of it, the next question is, what could be done with it? I have a video to show one example, how cutting scraps can be turned into new yarns. factory in Spain. It's a really nice story again, but the reality is that, again, it's quite small volumes that they can make, and there are just a few of these factories in the world that do that. I'll send around a sample of, this is what goes into the machine, which is a cut piece from production, and the yarn then comes out and that's turned into new fabric. This is something I brought from Bangladesh, a factory that I managed to visit. Even Bangladesh people themselves don't believe that they actually have a factory like that, because it's they consider it quite mysterious that somebody actually can make good quality yarn like that, but they can. So yeah, these recycling plants are struggling with lack of demand actually. So, for example, I know a factory that is already fully set up, but they aren't producing much anything because they are waiting for the demand to come there. This is pre-consumer. Cutting scraps from production, but it's basically the same thing as.
And can we take both consumers?
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing can be done for post-consumer. I mean, this
With
factory is
all
doing it.
like this dead skin into the clothes and all the things that happen with those?
Yes.
Okay.
This factory is making from post-consumer. This example comes from pre-consumer, so it's doesn't matter. Any other questions?
Yeah, it was for the first speech, but it applies, I think, for this.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, my question is the same one I was going to ask on the first speech, but I think you also, it applies to you. Is there a negative impact in terms of jobs about second-hand, getting used to buy second-hand? And also, is there a positive or negative impact in terms of job when it comes to recycling the raw materials to produce? Like, is there a balance in between how many jobs get lost or you make? You know what I mean?
I haven't really read any research about it, but clearly, yeah, it depends how to look at it. But what I believe myself very strongly is that when we live in a world that is very product-based, that we make and buy products, then it just switches to services, and it's just a matter of like where do you earn your income, not really like, for example, these guys who are there in the sorting these materials out. I hope very much that they will lose their job sorting behind the factory and instead go inside the factory and do it in there. Oh, yeah, the next slide has come up. So, another thing, what we are introducing to the big brands now is the concept of remanufacturing. Is that when you look at the bigger fabric pieces that you get from production, then how to use that in the next purchase order coming in, because factories very often use very similar fabrics and do very similar production over and over to their buyers. They are specialized on something like denim, for example. And what we say is that when you have, let's say, these 1/2 meter long fabrics that you could use as smaller details in a garment, which aren't even maybe visible for the consumer, the designer could easily say that this piece of fabric here might have a bit different shade, it doesn't matter. It might have a bit different fabric weight, it doesn't matter. But then when you take these yellow pieces out of the cutting marker, the blue section shows how much new fabric can be saved like that. So we estimate that something like 3% of new fabrics could be saved if remanufacturing was applied on a regular basis. Which is not much, it's 3%, but it's just a start. And we're talking about it because it's one good business case that creates win-win value for both factory and the brand. You don't need to investigate, you don't need recycling technologies, you can just start doing it by adapting your processes. And it's just an example of a trial that we made in a factory. They were producing 40,000 pairs of chinos for Lidl. And they needed 54,000 yards of fabric for that. We measured piece by piece how much fabric they had left over from one cutting and the side cuttings, and it was 19 yards, so we applied it to the whole production. It would be something like more than 300 yards. It could be used in next purchase order. And so if 2 details were replaced in a product, it would mean that 4,000 trousers would have a different detail. Yeah.
Can you even produce from the mixed pieces of polyester and cotton and make something usable from that?
Well, eventually you can do anything with the scraps and leftovers, but when we are our goal is really to implement it into mass production and make brands like H&M who really make their normal order is 100,000 pieces of the same garment. So how can you do that and use leftovers? When you use leftovers in a small production, like let's say I'll do 20 pieces or of something, then it's not nothing special. But it is special, very, very challenging to do this on mass scale. Actually, Reverse Resources is a software company. So I'm talking about textile industries because I have to understand it, and we are in there, but by the end of the day, we are actually a software company, because our goal is to move information that makes it possible to know what leftovers are there, where you can use it better. So we're looking into all different types of leftovers. We help factories to figure out what they've got, map it, have good data available, which they don't have now, and then we help them to insert that leftover fabrics and scraps into different ways of using it, finding better buyers to it, and just make better money with it. So basically we're creating a marketplace. As simple as that. And after 2 years of research and really heavy struggling with it, we haven't proven the business case, so we're still struggling with it.
You're business to business?
Yeah, it's business to business. But it's very promising, so I think in 3 months' time I can say that we have done it. My trip to Bangladesh was about launching another pilot project, and we're getting a lot of good feedback from here and there. We're just publishing our white paper to put it into the center of attention, because the industry isn't really talking about it. For example, H&M came out with their circularity, with their new goals. In April, they announced that by 2030 they will be 100% circular. But when you read their goals and what they mean with it, then actually what they mean is that they are just going to buy recycled materials, and they source it from the open market instead of closing their own loop of leftovers. And that's how many brands think, because this hasn't been a topic. With our research, we have kind of proven that the linear economic model is giving a very strong incentive for the factories to hide their data. There is no reason why they should or could or want to share how much leftovers they have. And what we actually deal with is that, challenging the current pricing scheme of the fashion industry and challenging the whole economic model of it. So it's not really an easy task. Yeah, I made a very, very boring slide again, because the daily work is very challenging, very systematically doing things like what are we actually tackling with this there is so many stakeholders whose interest we need to be considering. The global supply chains are really complex. There are Yay! Somebody got lucky. So yeah, the working culture is so different. Like having these negotiations with these businessmen in Bangladesh is kind of weird, very I'd say not weird, but very unusual experience. Making our solution useful for them and getting to a mutual understanding that they actually do need it. Yeah, it's.
So can I ask a question? What does a low cost mean for you? Like, what's actually your business model? It's a B2B, but how do you do currently? What's your pilot like?
We are doing several things at the same time. The pilot project that we launched is about testing if remanufacturing concept can be applied in mass production. What are the real challenges? Like, first of all, factories need to segregate materials. They have to store these materials. They don't have this storage space. How much would it cost for them to have this storage space? If they don't have the storage space, where can they find it? Is it cost efficient? Should they? How does it influence lead times? All these questions are very practical questions. Then it's also about understanding what are their current information systems they do and already use. They have something already. It's not gathering leftover information. So how can we link to that existing situation? Then it's also, we have basically 3 different business cases that we have validated, and how to adapt our software that we already have to prove that these business cases actually work. It's, and all these things.
I have a question. Who is actually owning this up to 20% of the fabric these days? Like, what is the motivation? Is it the brand or is it the factory?
Yeah, it's kind of the main point of the whole thing, that the brands think that they own it, but the real practice is that factories sell it. And factories earn more than 1/4 of their profit margins from these leftovers now. When brand comes and says that I want to use it, but I'm not going to pay for it again, and factories say, oh, we don't have any leftovers. So that's the main challenge.
You had a very interesting slide where you showed that in Bangladesh currently they are making like $100 million and they could be making $400 million. But where does this 300 million then come from? Not from the 25% of leftovers. But then I would only sell the leftovers and I would make 3 times the money I'm making from regular business. What's the logic?
It's this logic that it's when you grow that value of leftovers, you also reduce the volume of fabrics that you actually buy as new fabric. So it's kind of like you're circulating the resources that you already have. Did I answer your question? So it's kind of. They are already earning from these leftovers, and that's the very low price of garments is only possible because of that aftermarket. So what we're suggesting is that this aftermarket could be integrated as the main part of the market, and you can kind of like switch your focus to another point. We're saying that when you the current situation is that brand pays something once for these leftovers, pay for it again. Yes, I understand that you have to pay 170% of these fabrics actually, but then instead of saying that I'm not going to do it, let's find some other way to understand how to restructure this costing, because eventually, when these fabrics now are sold to traders, then it goes through the 3 or 4 different layers of traders until somebody buys it and uses it again. But the one who buys it and uses it has to pay quite high price compared to what factory actually earns from it. So it's like the whole system is already there, but it's about the efficiency of that circularity. Can't really explain it better.
Any other comments, questions? Yes. I'll come to you because I see that there's actually a microphone needed.
Thank you very much. My question is a little bit about this disrupting character of your business. Because if you're saying that you have 3 or 4 levels of traders from the leftovers, with your online business model, are you disrupting this market? And maybe are you feeling the resistance of all these local companies who are feeling somebody is coming from Europe, maybe with big money, with high computers, and now is taking over our business? Is this a fear what you experience?
Well, this trading is all about mafia. That's all mafia there. So we see it a lot that they are afraid of it. But these numbers, money numbers, are stronger. Like they are really thinking along. Now, like we started to talk about this win-win business case just recently, and now that we started to talk about it, and now they're actually listening. Otherwise, they were just like, yeah. But yeah, money talks. About disrupting the industry, I would say that what I told you here is just the start of it. Because eventually what the value of it is for the industry is that circularity, when you think about eventually how when materials are supposed to circulate, it's something that is already there and you kind of like, you want to use it. For a big brand, it's a strategical value to capture that resource and own it, instead of buying it all the time. So it's the question of being able to track it on and on and on. So for us, the circularity starts from getting fabric database running from factories, so that you can actually have something to track. And once you have database, it's big data, and you can imagine what can be done with it.
Let's take the last question from the back there. Yes, you.
Are you sure from your pilot investigations that the byproduct of making, say, 200 Tommy Hilfiger t-shirts isn't 50 Tommy Hilfiger's t-shirts that are not on the records? Because that would actually explain how they make their profits from the waste, and this is kind of a well-known, from cynics at least, that some of the products they make are not on the books. Tommy Hilfiger may not know about it, but they can still sell it as branded products. They just go through grey markets, so they make a lot more money actually on those.
That's this part here.
Okay, so I was late, but it's just, it must be a recurring thing that they don't want you to know of their products because there's a lot of
they are selling these products as a black market, and everybody knows it.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I missed you. So I should have the last question then. Wasting it.
Okay, let's take one more question. Yes.
I actually have a question about the zero waste thing. Like you said earlier, there was a company that claimed to be zero waste while burning the leftovers. But if the machines that are used to make new yarn from old clothing have parts that can't be recycled, like the electric cars, when the battery dies, there's nothing you can do with it. How can any company actually claim to be zero waste?
I think at the moment nobody really can do that, but that's a whole goal of circular economy, that when everything that is left over from your actions can be used somewhere for something, then we can't really call any of it waste.